The rain arrived precisely as the church bells struck 3, as though Providence itself had chosen to mark Clarissa Pemberton's humiliation with meteorological punctuation. She stood beneath the dripping portico of St. George's, Hanover Square, watching the last of the wedding guests disperse into their lacquered carriages, their silks and superfine wool protected by liveried servants wielding umbrellas large enough to shelter small families. No one offered her such courtesy. No one met her eyes. 3 hours earlier, she had been Miss Clarissa Pemberton, eldest daughter of the late Sir Robert Pemberton, a woman of 24 with modest beauty, considerable intelligence, and a dowry sufficient to attract the second son of a viscount. Now she was simply the girl whose betrothed had failed to appear, the girl whose wedding breakfast sat untouched at Pemberton House, the girl whose humiliation would fuel drawing-room conversation for the remainder of the season. Her younger sister Amelia had wept dramatically in the vestry, though whether from genuine sympathy or disappointment at the cancelled celebration remained unclear. Her mother had retreated home with a vinaigrette and her aunt's supporting arm, murmuring about disgrace and ruin, as though Clarissa herself had orchestrated this catastrophe. Her uncle, who had grudgingly agreed to give her away after her father's death 2 years prior, had departed without a word, his face rigid with the particular anger of a man whose afternoon had been inconvenienced. Only Clarissa remained, because someone needed to speak with the vicar about the flowers, the musicians, the staff who had prepared the church. Someone needed to maintain dignity while her world dissolved like sugar in rain. Miss Pemberton. The voice emerged from the shadows of the portico's far end, deep, measured, carrying an authority that made her spine straighten reflexively. She turned to find a man she recognized only from distant observation at various societal functions. Nathaniel Ashton, 5th Earl of Westmere, a figure of considerable consequence and equally considerable rumors. He was tall, dark-haired, perhaps 35, with the sort of austere handsomeness that suggested Byronic brooding had been carved into aristocratic features by a sculptor with a preference for harsh lines. A scar traced his left cheekbone, pale against weathered skin. The result, rumor insisted, of a duel fought in Vienna over a married woman. He dressed with severe elegance in black superfine and gray waistcoat, as though perpetually prepared for either mourning or seduction. Lord Westmere. She managed a curtsy, despite the trembling in her knees. I was not aware you had attended the ceremony, or rather, the absence of one. I did not. He moved closer, his greatcoat shedding water onto the ancient stones. I came seeking you specifically, Miss Pemberton. I have a proposition that may interest you, given your recently altered circumstances. The presumption should have offended her. Instead, she felt only a cold, clarifying curiosity. How flattering that my public disgrace has reached your ears so swiftly, my lord. The London gossip apparatus truly is remarkably efficient. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or approval. I have made it a point to monitor the Pemberton family situation for some weeks now. Your former betrothed's failure to appear, while unfortunate for you, presents an unexpected opportunity for us both. An opportunity. She heard the bitterness in her own voice and despised it. How remarkable that my ruination should prove so convenient for others. You are not ruined, Miss Pemberton, merely inconvenienced. He drew a sealed letter from his coat. I am prepared to offer you marriage, immediately, if you are willing. Special license obtained. Ceremony performed this evening in my private chapel. You would become the Countess of Westmere before midnight, and your current embarrassment would transform into a rather romantic tale of rescue and devotion that will eclipse your absent bridegroom's insult within a fortnight. Clarissa stared at him, certain she had misheard. You cannot possibly be serious. I am rarely anything else. He extended the letter. This contains the specific terms of my proposal. You may read it at your leisure, though I would appreciate a response within the hour. My carriage waits on Brook Street. She took the letter with numb fingers, her mind struggling to comprehend the absurdity of this encounter. Lord Westmere, you do not know me. We have never been properly introduced. Why would you possibly wish to marry a woman whose own betrothed found her so insufficient that he abandoned her at the altar? Because you are precisely what I require, Miss Pemberton. His gaze held hers with unsettling intensity. You are intelligent, educated, capable of managing complex social situations, and, most critically, you are now in desperate need of exactly what I can provide: The symmetry is extraordinarily convenient. What you can provide, she repeated slowly. You speak of marriage as though it were a business transaction. All marriages are transactions, Miss Pemberton. I am simply honest enough to acknowledge it explicitly. He gestured toward the letter. I need a countess capable of restoring Westmere's social standing and managing my mother's declining health with competence and discretion. You need immediate rescue from social catastrophe and financial security for yourself and your family. Your father's debts did not die with him, I believe. Your mother and sister face reduced circumstances that will only worsen without your marriage to someone of substance. Heat flooded her face. You have investigated my family's private affairs? Thoroughly. He showed no shame. I do not make important decisions based on insufficient information. Your father was a kind man but an incompetent manager of money. Your mother is a woman of limited imagination who has placed all hope for the family's security on your sister's marriages. Amelia is pretty, but vapid. Sophia is 16 and still in the schoolroom. Your uncle provides minimal support and resents the obligation. You have been managing the household accounts for 2 years, maintaining appearances on a fraction of your previous income, and you were marrying Charles Davenport not because you loved him, but because he represented the only acceptable offer you had received. The accuracy of his assessment struck her like a physical blow. You are remarkably well informed, my lord, and remarkably cruel to catalogue my failures with such precision. I am offering you salvation, Miss Pemberton, not cruelty. His voice softened fractionally. Read the letter. If you find the terms acceptable, send word to my address. If not, I will trouble you no further, and you may face your future as you see fit. But consider carefully what that future contains without this intervention. He bowed then, a gesture of perfect formal courtesy that somehow emphasized rather than diminished the outrageous presumption of his proposal, and departed into the rain without waiting for her response. Clarissa stood alone in the portico, clutching a letter from a stranger who had just offered to transform her disaster into deliverance, and wondered whether she had finally lost her reason entirely. The letter remained sealed until she reached Pemberton House, where her mother's hysterics had subsided into grim silence, and Amelia's tears had given way to petulant complaints about the waste of her new dress. Clarissa climbed to her small chamber, the one she had occupied since surrendering the larger rooms to her sisters, and locked the door before breaking the Earl's distinctive seal. Miss Pemberton, I propose marriage under the following terms. You will become Countess of Westmere, with all attendant rights, properties, and allowances. You will receive an annual personal income of £1,500, independent of household expenses. Your mother and sisters will be established in the London house currently occupied by my late aunt, with an annual stipend sufficient for comfortable maintenance. Your father's remaining debts will be settled immediately. In exchange, you will serve as my wife in public and manage my mother's care during her final illness. The Dowager Countess suffers from a gradual decline of mind and body that requires patient, intelligent supervision. You will also restore Westmere's position in society, which has suffered from my extended absence abroad and my reputation for unsociability. Our marriage will be one of practical partnership, not romantic sentiment. I require discretion, competence, and loyalty. I do not require affection, though I will treat you with respect and courtesy. Separate bedchambers will be maintained. The question of heirs may be addressed at a future date if mutually agreeable. You are not obligated to accept these terms, but I believe you will find them substantially more favorable than any alternative currently available to you. If you accept, send word to Westmere House before 6 o'clock this evening. The ceremony will take place at 8. Yours in practical consideration, Westmere. Clarissa read the letter 3 times, each reading revealing new layers of calculated coldness and unexpected generosity. He was buying her services as one might hire an exceptionally qualified housekeeper, but the compensation he offered was extraordinary. Her mother and sisters secured, her father's debts erased, her own financial independence guaranteed, and all she needed to surrender was the romantic fantasy she had already learned to abandon years ago. She had never loved Charles Davenport. She had accepted his proposal because at 24, with modest beauty and diminishing prospects, she understood that marrying a kind man who valued her intelligence was likely the best fortune she could expect. She had convinced herself that companionship and respect formed a sufficient foundation for contentment. Charles had apparently disagreed, given his failure to appear for their wedding. Lord Westmere, at least, was being honest about his requirements. No false promises of devotion, no pretense of romance, simply a transaction between two people who needed what the other could provide. Clarissa walked to her small writing desk and withdrew paper and ink. Her hand remained steady as she wrote her acceptance. The private chapel at Westmere House was a small jewel of medieval architecture attached to the main residence, its stained glass windows glowing like scattered rubies and sapphires in the candlelight. Clarissa arrived at 7:30, wearing the green silk dress she had planned for her wedding breakfast rather than the elaborate white gown that now hung in her wardrobe like an expensive ghost. The Earl of Westmere stood before the altar in severe black evening dress, speaking quietly with the elderly clergyman who would perform the ceremony. He turned as Clarissa entered, his dark gaze sweeping over her appearance with the assessing quality of a man evaluating a potentially valuable acquisition. "Miss Pemberton, you came. Did you doubt I would, my lord? I considered it a possibility." He gestured toward a woman waiting in the shadows, his housekeeper, Mrs. Carlyle, who would serve as witness along with his secretary, Mr. Brennan. "We should proceed immediately. I have arranged for a wedding supper to be served afterward, during which we may discuss the practical arrangements of our new situation. No flowers, no music, no family or friends, simply a cold transaction performed in an empty chapel by a man who spoke of their marriage as though it were a particularly complex business merger." Clarissa took her place beside him and repeated the ancient vows with a calm voice that surprised her. When the Earl placed his ring on her finger, a magnificent emerald surrounded by diamonds, clearly selected from the Westmere family collection without reference to her personal taste, she felt as though she were observing this ceremony from a great distance, watching some other woman marry a stranger for utterly practical reasons. "I now pronounce you man and wife." The clergyman's words fell into silence. Lord Westmere turned to her, and for a moment, Clarissa thought he might kiss her according to tradition. Instead, he bowed formally and offered his arm. "Lady Westmere, shall we dine?" The wedding supper was served in a small dining room appointed with restrained elegance, the table set for two with silver and crystal that reflected candlelight like captured stars. A footman served courses of soup, fish, roasted fowl, and delicate pastries with silent efficiency, while the Earl outlined his expectations with the methodical precision of a general briefing his officers before campaign. "My mother occupies the East Wing. She has good days and difficult ones. On good days, she recognizes family and can maintain conversation for short periods. On difficult days, she becomes confused and sometimes agitated. The physician visits weekly. There are 2 nurses in constant attendance, but she requires family presence as well, a familiar face providing reassurance and continuity." Clarissa set down her wine glass carefully. "How long has she been ill?" "The decline began approximately 18 months ago. It has accelerated in recent weeks." Something flickered across his austere features. Grief, perhaps, buried beneath rigid control. She was a formidable woman, brilliant, sharp-tongued, utterly uncompromising. Watching her fade has been difficult. "I am sorry." The words emerged with genuine sympathy. "My own father's decline was mercifully brief, but I remember the particular pain of watching a strong person weaken." He looked at her with something approaching surprise, as though he had not expected understanding. "Yes, precisely that." They ate in silence for several moments before he continued. "You will also need to address Westmere's social position. I have been abroad for much of the past 5 years, Vienna, Paris, various diplomatic entanglements that are not appropriate for current discussion. In my absence, invitations have declined. Connections have withered. My reputation, never particularly warm, has curdled into something approaching scandal." "The duel in Vienna?" Clarissa ventured carefully. His mouth curved in something that was not quite a smile. "Among other incidents, I am considered dangerous, unsociable, possibly unstable. Not the sort of man with whom respectable families wish to associate." He met her gaze directly. "You, by contrast, are considered intelligent, capable, and utterly respectable despite this afternoon's misfortune. Your presence as my countess will do much to soften society's perception. You are asking me to rehabilitate your reputation through proximity. I am asking you to open doors that have been closed to me." "Yes." He refilled her wine glass with unexpected attentiveness. In exchange, those same doors will open for your mother and sisters. Amelia will have access to social circles previously beyond her reach. She might marry well if she can be taught to converse about something other than ribbons and the weather. Despite everything, Clarissa felt a smile tug at her lips. You have observed my sister closely. I observe everything closely, Lady Westmere. It is a habit that serves me well. The use of her new title sent a strange shiver through her. She was a countess now, wife to one of England's most powerful and mysterious peers, mistress of properties and fortunes she had not yet seen. And she knew almost nothing about the man who had purchased these transformations with a special license and a collection of calculated promises. May I ask you a question, my lord? You may ask anything, though I reserve the right to decline answering. Why did you truly need to marry me specifically? There must be dozens of suitable women who would accept your proposal, scandal or not. An earl with your resources could arrange a far more conventional alliance. He studied her across the candlelit table, his dark eyes unreadable. You are correct. I could have selected from several candidates, but they would have required courtship, romantic gestures, pretty lies about affection and devotion. They would have expected a husband who attended balls and made charming conversation and pretended to be something other than what I am. He paused. You, Miss Pemberton, Lady Westmere, required only honesty and practical consideration. You are capable of accepting reality without requiring it to be dressed in sentiment. That quality is rare and valuable. You wanted a wife who would not demand your heart. I wanted a wife who understood that some hearts are better left unexamined. He rose from his chair with fluid grace. It is late, and you have endured a trying day. Mrs. Carlyle will show you to your chambers. We leave for Westmere Park in Derbyshire tomorrow afternoon. You may visit your mother and sisters in the morning to inform them of the marriage and make necessary arrangements. Clarissa stood as well, suddenly exhausted by the weight of all that had transformed in mere hours. Lord Westmere. Nathaniel, he interrupted quietly. We are married, madam. You may use my given name in private, at least. Nathaniel. The name felt strange on her tongue, too intimate for their transaction. Thank you for the rescue, however calculated it may have been. He moved closer, near enough that she caught the scent of sandalwood and something darker, more complex. For a moment she thought he might touch her. Instead, he simply inclined his head in that formal gesture that seemed habitual. Thank me when you have met my mother and decided whether you have accepted salvation or merely traded one form of confinement for another. He departed before she could respond, leaving her alone in the elegant dining room with the remains of her wedding supper and the emerald ring heavy on her finger, the physical proof that her life had irrevocably changed in ways she could not yet fully comprehend.